Greetings. Welcome to the Gateway Test Advantage. For the next little while, I'm going to give you some insight on how to take tests better. I'm Dr. Cooney Beasley. I'm a graduate of the Marine Military Academy in Harlingen, Texas, the toughest military school in the United States. And I don't make very many bones about it. It was tough. I got my bachelor's degree from TCU. I have a master's degree from Oklahoma City University. I finished my master's in 50 weeks. That was before they had accelerated programs. I did the whole master's program in a little under a year. And did that while I was on full-time active duty. So I had to play Army during the day and go to school at night. And these weren't accelerated compressed classes. I still had to go to class 40 hours for each course. I have a Doctor of Ministry in Greek and Hebrew Studies from the Tyndale Seminary. And I have a PhD in Urban and Public Administration from the University of Texas at Arlington. I'm a retired Army officer, and I say that because I do have a piece of paper that says I'm retired, but they just reissued me a card and put me in the standby reserve. I've been a college professor for 18 years, and I am the founder and dean of the Gateway Preparatory School and the Gateway program. What you're getting tonight is one of the slices of our Gateway program, one of the things that we have taught our students in the Gateway Preparatory School for the last several years. One of the things that I would like to share with you is we've had a great deal of success working with students. One of the students one of our alumni that we hired recently was in our original graduating class in 1998, and he just finished his master's degree at UT Dallas here about 3 weeks ago, sat for his thesis defense, and he came to work for us the same day he finished his thesis. And that may not seem that big of a deal, but considering he's only 21 when he finishes his master's degrees, that's kind of cool, I think. What I want you to do is, for those of you on the video program, get your audio-video program up. There is a reference guide that goes with this and a workbook. When you have the reference guide and workbook, you can call them up. Rule number one, always take notes. I see some of you have got paper out. Always take notes. Rule number two, scope things out. You with me? Good. Now, we always take notes. Those of you on the video program, there is a workbook there that you can call up. Use the Windows function so that you can watch the video program and take notes using your word processor. I want to make sure that you do take notes, and taking notes is very important. Everybody takes notes. If you're going to be successful, you always take notes. You with me? We're going to scope some things out first. Scope of this program, we're going to be preparing for tests. How many of you have ever had to take a test? How many of you didn't really like the way you felt before you took a test? Don't you get kind of queasy? Man, I got to take this test. We're going to talk about levels of knowledge. There are different levels of knowledge that you need to have when you take tests that prepare you to take tests. We're going to talk about preparation strategies and actually taking a test. You with me? Let's talk about academic tests. You all have been in school at some point in time, right? As for me, I went to college 22 years. Some of you are not even 22 years old, are you? Think about that. To college 22 years. Not because I couldn't pass any courses, but for me, for a long time, college was kind of a hobby. I'd like to go, took the courses to argue with the professors. I actually took courses after I got my doctorates with professors who had lower degrees than I did, and I would go in there and take their courses and argue with them. It was kind of fun. Anyway, we're going to talk about academic courses. Generally in academic courses, when you're dealing with tests, you're taking what's called an objective test, or you're taking an essay test. And we're going to talk about how you deal with these different types of tests. Now, we talk about standardized tests. A lot of people take standardized tests, SAT, ACT, CLEPS, Dante's, GREs, GEDs, GMATs. We're going to go over some of the principles that are involved in taking these tests, but we have specific programs for these specific tests that focus on the very specific things that you need to have for these tests. What we will be going over today are general tests that you would normally take if you went to school. So there is a lot of correlation with the principles, but this program we're doing on test preparation in the Gateway Test Advantage is not specifically geared to standardized national type tests. The principles are there, but This is not a replacement for specific test preparation for specialized, standardized tests like this, the SAT and the CLEP and things like that, just so that you know up front. In preparing for tests, we have other programs that are associated with the Gateway Test Advantage, our Study Advantage, our Writing Advantage, and we're looking for getting the best preparation. The best preparation for tests, of course, is to study, and if you have essay exams, the best way to do well on an essay exam is to write well. We're not going to go too much into studying and writing because this is more focused on how to take the test itself. I do recommend if you have an opportunity to get to some of these other courses, that you get to these other courses and they will help you and they will complement this particular course. From our Study Advantage, there are things such as how to do bone and block documents. It's a very specific way on taking notes. We teach in our Study Advantage a thing called the KISS format, how to organize your thinking. KISS stands for key points, insight, significance, and summation. We talk about the ROAD method, and you'll see the ROAD method here in this program. ROAD is an acronym for Read, Organize, Analyze, and Document. And they talk about the levels of reading. We're going to touch on some of the levels of reading in this course. From our Writing Advantage, again, the ROAD method appears in the Writing Advantage. And the Writing Advantage talks about abstracts and vignettes. That's a way of writing. It talks about how to use a KISS paper. And it talks about monographs, how to write longer essays. Some of this stuff will be touched upon. I would recommend that you look at these other programs that become available. They complement this testing program very, very well. They're designed to be worked together. Now, the best preparation for any test is, of course, know the material, right? If you know the material, you're going to do well on tests. And you got to know what to expect, how they're going to ask for the information. Do you know the difference between a hard question and an easy question? You know what the difference is between a hard question and an easy question? Easy question is you know the answer. Hard question is you don't know the answer. Okay? Now, does everyone here know their phone number? Do they know their birthday? Okay? How many of you know my birthday? So if we were to ask you, what's Dr. Beasley's birthday? You'd miss that question, wouldn't you? You'd get that wrong. Because that's a hard question, because you don't know it. There's nothing really complicated about knowing the answer to a question. If you can get the answer to the question, it's no longer hard. If it becomes that simple, then why do people have so much trouble studying, writing, and taking tests? There are levels of knowledge. Now, this is not levels of intelligence. Levels of knowledge. That means what level of information do you need to access? How detailed of the information do you need to have for a particular test or a particular assignment that you have? You don't always need to absorb every ounce of information there is. I was on the telephone this afternoon, just before I came here, with one of our students who are in our internet school. We have an internet school. And she was very frustrated. She thought she needed to absorb every bit of information that she was studying. And I said, it's a physical impossibility. This young lady was very upset that she could not absorb all of the information. And I told her, you can't absorb all of the information. You have to determine the level of knowledge that you need for your assignment. And that's part of what she had to do in the current course that she was in, was learn how to pick out what was important and to organize her thinking. And she had never had to do that before. She simply had to remember the information and regurgitate the information. She was a very, very bright student. And she was very bright because she could absorb a lot of information and regurgitate a lot of information, but she never had to develop a process for herself to organize the information, to determine how much of the information do I really need for what I really need to get done. And that's very important because most people don't realize there are different levels of knowledge that you need to know. First level here is the resource level. We call that the resource level because you need to be able to research and read. If you have the resource level of knowledge, you're simply saying, you know what, if I really need that information, I can go to the encyclopedia. I can read the information. I know where I would need to go to get it. You may not know it, but you could probably get it if you needed it, right? Right? It's like looking it up in the phone book. That's a resource level of knowledge. You don't have to memorize the phone book. You just have to know that if you need to get somebody's phone number, you can go to the phone book, or you can go online. That's resource level of knowledge. You with me? When you're doing resource level of knowledge, you need to understand the purpose. Why am I getting this information? If you're just getting a phone number, you're just gathering information. You need to get the person's phone number. But if you want to find out some stuff, if you want to get information, you can do what's called a thematic research. How many of you have done thematic research? Every one of you has done thematic research, but you don't know it. You know what thematic research is? You're going and trying to find some common elements. You ever called 2 or 3 places up and asked them for their price on something? Go to the phone book and you need a tow, or you need somebody to fix the glass in your car, or you need something and you get in the phone book and you need new tires or something, and you call 3 or 4 places, right? Okay, that's thematic research. You're trying to find some common elements. How much is this going to cost me? What's the best price? You've done it. Did it hurt? You know, they don't have the dial phones anymore, so you're sitting there punching it into your cell phone, right? But that's thematic research. The only difference between going to the phone book or going to the internet and getting a couple of places and comparing prices, all you're doing in academic courses is going to a couple of different books or a couple of different websites and pulling out some of the information that you need. The thought process is exactly the same, but most people don't realize that. When they start doing schoolwork, their brain locks up, doesn't it? But you don't think, this is just like, finding out what the price of tires are. Now, a thesis type is where you're trying to get information to argue about it. Have you ever had an argument? Did you ever try to dig up stuff to see if the other person might not be telling the truth? Huh? Did you ever research and say, well, this guy said this, but I caught him on that. That didn't really happen. Right? Did it ever happen to you? You ever check on somebody and find out it wasn't true? That's thesis. That's thesis kind of research. The only difference between doing that kind of research, finding out if somebody's telling the truth, or checking something out, and doing it in school, is that you're going to go to a book or a website to do that, and you're going to extract the information. That's what happens in elections. People do thesis types of research. They try to find something on the candidate that they try to dig up and resurrect, or exhume from a graveyard someplace and say, this guy was a bad guy because, he had an ingrown toenail when he was 13 or something like that. So, the purpose of research, topical, just gathering information. Thesis is comparing things. Thematic is comparing things. Thesis is trying to argue a point. You all do it. And like you've seen in other programs, we talk about the subconscious. You've got it back in the subconscious, but you haven't connected the subconscious to the conscious. You can do it, but when you try to do it in school, it just doesn't connect, does it? Does it? Okay. There are types of research. We can do what's called a topographic. We're just going to do a surface skim. It's kind of like going to the yellow pages. You're going to look at the ads that have the biggest pictures. It's kind of the surface skim. You're going to try to find out who the big players are. If you're looking to buy tires, you're going to look for the big players. You're really not going to try to get to the detailed guys who they don't even have an ad. You're probably not going to want to buy tires from them, right? Ideographic, that's where you're going to do research really deep in a particular area. If you wanted to write a very long paper on George Washington or Julius Caesar or somebody like that, and you did a very deep research, got lots of books and stuff, that's called ideographic. Nomothetic, that means you're going across multiple sources. That's kind of like thematic, right? Nomothetic is you're going across multiple sources. What do these other sources say about this? You with me? You didn't get this in school, did you? Okay, good. Now, in a research process, you're really only going to do 2 things. You want to locate, find where the information is. Say, my name starts with a B. Where would you look in the phone book? Under the B's, right? So, research process is knowing how to locate information. And when you get there, discovering information. If you go to the B's in the phone book and you find my name and you see this number, you're going through a discovery process. You've discovered my number. If you're going through the yellow pages and you're trying to locate somebody who's selling tires, and you discover that there's one right down the street from you. You with me? All we're doing is taking natural thinking processes that are in your brain already and teaching you how to use them in other places. Because once you get this, you're going to go, gosh, this isn't hard. This isn't hard, and it's not. Now, reading. This is one of my heroes, Mortimer Adler. For about 30 or 40 years, he was the editor of the Encyclopedia Britannica. He put together this thing called the Great Books of the Western World. He said there were 3 levels of reading: inspectional, analytical, and syntopical. And in our study advantage, we go into a great deal of detail talking about these specific ways of reading. What you need to understand in this particular course is that inspectional reading is getting the main points. Analytical reading is getting the details. Syntopical reading is going to multiple sources, looking at 2 or 3 different books or encyclopedias or 2 or 3 different websites. Then we have reference level. Reference level means you've actually pulled the book from the shelves. Reference level means you don't know it, but you have it someplace, or you can get to it real quick. We do reference level types of work when we have, let's say, an open book or a take-home test. It gives you time to look the answer up, right? The only way you flunk a take-home test or an open book test is sheer laziness, isn't it? Right? Or you run out of time. But most of the time, if you have a take-home test and somebody flunks it, it's just sheer laziness. I've had people flunk take-home tests, and they gave me all these different excuses, and it's just sheer laziness. But we give them reference level, take-home test. What you're really trying to do is access the information, pull out the information you need. You do inspectional reading. You're looking for the big pieces, and if you really need to get into detail, you know where to go from there. And we do a thing called a bone document. We kind of just list information. We're not writing huge notes. We're just simply listing things, telling ourselves, making a note for ourselves, what do we need to know? We're not getting detail, just list. Okay, you with me? It's like making a laundry list or making a grocery list. You're not going to write down, when you say, I need some milk, you're not going to write down, says, I need whole milk, no, I need 2% milk from this particular company, has to have an expiration. You're not writing all this detail down, are you? You're just writing I need milk. And then when you go to the place where the milk is and you open that cooler, and you've got several varieties, then you kind of make your decision there. But you don't need to take notes on all that stuff before you go there, right? All you need to know is milk, right? And it gets you to what you need to know, right? So when we do a bone document, we're just trying to put the bones there. I need milk. I need cookies, lettuce, right? Recognition level. Recognition level means that you're able to put 2 pieces of information together. And we'll get into some of the specifics on this later. You usually find this on multiple choice and matching type questions. You're able to match some information in the question with one of the answers. What you're trying to do is what we call detect and connect. Detect what goes together and connect them. Again, you would do inspectional reading. When you're trying to study for a multiple choice test, you don't need to do detailed reading. You just need to find out what the main ideas are, and you should be able to connect the big ideas. And I'll show you here in a few minutes. You do a thing called block notes. That's where you would write your shopping list and write a little bit more detail in there. Instead of just saying we need milk, you might say, yes, we need milk, but we need it in the 1-quart cartons. Or you need to get the 6-inch tostadas. A little more detail there. Instead of just saying get meat, you're going to say get some steak and get some hamburger and get some sausage. You understand? Get a little more detail there when you're doing this. So that way you can connect things. You have enough detail to connect things. Okay, you with me? With me? Then they have what's called a recall level. That's the next level. You're going to have to get a little bit more detail here. This is recognition plus. You recognize information that goes together, and it's kind of a fill-in-the-blank thing. You're going to have to depend on the information that they give you, and you're going to have to fill in the blank with the information they're asking you. It comes from memory and knowledge. You have to do a little more analytical reading. That means you're going to have to get a little bit more detail. Okay? We have a thing called ABCOQ notes. ABCOQ stands for abstract of terms, definition of words. Biographies, you want to name all the people. C, chronologies, any events that went on. O is the outline, if there outline or major headings. And questions. Are there any questions in the chapter or the book? If there's not any questions, you write the questions yourself. That's what we're trying to do here in the recall level, because they're expecting you to remember these things. Recitation level. Okay, we're starting to get into more detailed stuff here. Recitation level, it's recall plus. You're going to have to get more detail. A lot of times you'll have a test that requires a short answer or maybe 2 or 3 sentences or a paragraph. You're going to have enough information to be able to write the 2 or 3 sentences or a paragraph, right? Okay? You're going to have to answer basic questions: who, what, when, where. It does require analytical reading because you're going to have to get that level of detail. And you want to focus on what we call key points. What are the main points? Not just one point, but probably 3, 4, 5 points that you're going to have to make if you have a short answer. It's called recitation because you're going to have to recite something. You're going to have to give people more than just 1 or 2 words for an answer. It requires a little bit more studying, a little bit more reading, and a little bit more knowledge. Then we have what's called the reasoning level. This is recitation plus. Sometimes you have to write a short essay. You ever had to take an essay exam? Had to write a short essay? Man, I didn't like those when I was going to school. And you probably didn't like them either, did you? Well, I'm going to try to help you by giving you just a couple of pointers. When you do a short essay, you're getting beyond who, what, when, where. You want to get a little bit into the how and the why. Instead of just regurgitating information, you're going to try to make a reasoned answer, a reasoned argument, a reasoned approach. And we do a thing called KISS notes. We want to state facts, and then we want to talk about our opinion or our perspective on it. Many of you who will be taking the SAT will have to write on the reasoning level, and the next level we'll be getting to. You're going to have to be able to state facts and to take a position and effectively defend it. That's at the rhetorical level. When we get at the highest level of knowledge you've got to be able to have. That's reasoning plus. Reasoning where you can think something through, give a couple of different opinions on it. Rhetorical level generally is a long essay. You're going to have to take a perspective or be able to argue your position. You're going to have to defend your position. It's going to require what we call syntopical reading. You're going to have to get multiple perspectives, multiple opinions, multiple sources to be able to effectively deal with it rhetorically. We do things with KISS notes, and we have a thing called parallel notes. That's where you take a note on this book, and then you take the notes on another book, and you kind of set them side by side, and you kind of see what they have in common and what makes them really different. If we took controversial issues, this is how we would have to deal with them at the rhetorical level. If people wanted to talk about things such as abortion, things such as whether or not we should have troops overseas, things like that, it would be at the rhetorical level because you would have to take 2 perspectives and effectively argue it. And you'd have to know a lot of information to do that, wouldn't you? That's why you don't write long essays all the time. Most of the time, in most courses in high school, you're only going to get hit with 1 or 2 long essays a semester, right? And in college, it's generally 1 long essay or a paper per semester, sometimes 2. Because they're hard to do. It requires a lot of time. Requires a lot of effort, a lot of thinking. But you still need to be prepared to know that this is a level and that I don't need to study at this level if I'm taking a multiple choice test. I don't need to get that deep into the material. A lot of people don't realize that. They think they have to absorb everything. And you can't. Preparation strategies. Well, one of the best preparation strategies is to, of course, take our study advantage. We have another course in this, and it goes into a great deal of detail on how to study. I need to tell you about testing modes, testing formats, anticipating tests, and how to pick out questions. In our study advantage, we talked about our road system, how to take notes and reading. It really will help you in your study. And we do have these things. It's a complimentary program. We do have DVDs available on this. Here's our testing modes. When I say testing modes, how are they going to test you? Most tests that you take a lot of times are timed, right? They say, well, you got 30 minutes or 45 minutes or something to take the test. You ever been take a time test? Okay. Sometimes they're self-paced. They'll let you take as long as you need, some tests. Others are self-administered. They let you take the test on your own. Some of them are called resource, where they give you information to work with. And you can take tests online. How many of you have ever taken an online test? Okay, yeah. So, and by the way, they're going more and more and more to online tests. More and more things are going to online tests. I would venture to say in the next several years you'll see at least half or 3/4 of all testing done will be done online, even in regular public and private schools. There will be a time when you will go to school and assignments will be given and the teacher will tell you, take the test at home tonight. Go to the website, call the test down and take the test. And that'll happen. It's happening in colleges now. Our testing format. We have two broad testing formats, objective tests and essay tests. And on our objective tests are generally, the easiest type is a multiple choice test, then a matching test. You've seen the matching test, haven't you? We're going to show you one here. Fill in the blank, short answer. And then in essay, we also have a short answer, and sometimes a little, not as short, a little longer than a short answer. We have short essay and long essay. What's the difference between a short essay and a long essay? Well, short essay is short, long essay is long. Okay, just wanted to make sure. When you have objective tests, you want to take blocked notes, and to just tell you simply what blocked notes are, they're just an outline. Outline with a little bit of detail put into them. You can do the ABCOQ, that's the abstract of terms, biographies, chronologies, outline of major headings, and any questions that you have. If you have a textbook and you have to take a chapter test, if you can go through that chapter and pick out all the new vocabulary words or the terms they're using, usually in italics, right, or bold, if you can pick all of those out and know the definitions, if you can go through and figure out the names of the people and who they were and why they were important, if you can go through and figure out the dates of the events and why they were important, and you took the major headings in the chapter and just understood what the major headings meant, and if there's any questions at the end of the chapter and you could answer those questions, guess what? You're going to pass the test. But a lot of people don't think that way. They think, I got to start on page 1 and I got to do the linear reading, line after line, page after page. And you know what? After 5 or 6, 7 things, thing number 8 is going to bounce off your head. Thing number 9 is going to... You ever had that happen? Your brain gets full? Nothing more will go in? Unless it's something really important, then you have to replace, like you have to reach in and get number 5, pull it out, and put number 21 in. That ever happen? And that's what happens. Because you're reading linearly. You're not trying to understand and learn. You're simply looking at the stuff. And you can say, I studied for 6 hours, but you only remembered 6 minutes because that's all your brain would hold. Because you're doing it straight line, linearly. We teach people to do ABCOQ. They're not going linear. They're going all over the place and gathering things up, and your brain is stimulated using more parts of the brain. And there's more places to store the information. But in an objective test, we're trying to link fact with fact, information with information, what you know to something you know. 2 things that you know, knowledge to knowledge, linking them together. You with me? Good. Multiple choice. The thing about multiple choice tests is all the answers are given. They give you the answer. Do you ever think about that? They give you the answer. You have to link given information with given information. They're going to give you both sides of the answer. You have to recognize what goes together. You also have to recognize what doesn't go together. And in a lot of test-taking techniques, recognizing what doesn't go together can often help you recognize what does go together. Matching. When you have a matching type question, you do the same thing in multiple choice. You know, the answers are given, right? All you have to do is link the information. Given information with given information, putting two bits of information together, recognizing what goes together and recognizing what doesn't go together. Fill in the blank. They're going to give you a clue. They're going to say something, and you have to tell them what you know about it. Fill in the blank, you know. They give you something, and you have to do it from memory. You have to recall something from given information. They don't give you the answer. You have to come up with half of the answer because they're giving you the first half by asking you the question. You've got to look for trigger words and terms that are going to help your memory, and there are lists that you're going to have to begin to develop. You can use what's called mnemonics. That's where you make words or sentences out of things that you need to remember. Those of you who had music, every good boy does fine, so that you have the scale in music, you see. It helps you remember that. I mean, the first time I had that was in the 4th grade, and I can still remember that, you see. So those of you who had music, and that helps you. A mnemonic will help you. Think about using mnemonics for things that you have to remember. When you get the short answer, it's just like a fill-in-the-blank question. The only difference is it's a bigger blank. They give you more space there because they're expecting more than 1 or 2 words. You're going to have to recite longer chains of information. You're going to have to do series, combinations, lists, give them multiple elements. You can't say, well, he did this because he thought that it was a good thing for him to do that at that time because it was a good thing and the timing was right. I've actually gotten those on essay exams where people would write like that. And they said nothing, very eloquently said nothing. I think they would be probably need to go into politics or something. Very eloquently said nothing. Remember, I was talking to you about block notes. This is what block notes look like. If you're using a word processor, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you, if you want to take notes, word processing is the best way to do it. Use tables function. You get these tables set up, and you can put your bone document terms over here. This tells you what you need to know, and then you put your detail over there. Then over on the end, way over there, on the right-hand side reference, it tells you where you got the information, so if you have to go back and get more. This is just a shopping list. All this is. It's all notes are. Shopping. What do you think shopping list is? It's a note. So you list cabbage, cheese, milk, 2 cabbages, American cheese and some cheddar cheese. Get milk and half and half. Cornflakes. That's all it is. There's nothing much to it. What we're trying to do is link fact to fact, term to definition. You with me? Okay. ABCOQ, abstract of terms, biography, chronology, outline, questions. There's kind of a block note in a different order. You could go through a chapter. In fact, people who have trouble studying, who just can't get into it, you ever gotten the case, man, I'm looking at the page and it looks blurry. You ever had that happen to you? Just, oh man, the words are just crawling all over the page. You can't focus. When you can't focus, use ABCOQ. Just say, okay, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to look for all of the words in italics or all of the words in bold, and I'm going to find out the definition of these words. Then I'm going to find everybody's name here, who they are and what they did. Then what happened? Give me some dates and times. And then I'm going to look at these headers, and these headers kind of, headings line up. Those little bold things in the middle of the chapters, divides a chapter up. Those are headings. I'm going to list those down and kind of figure out what they mean. And if there's any questions, quite frankly, by the time you get down to questions, and there's questions at the end of the chapter, you can pretty well answer them. But it didn't hurt you. It allowed you to organize your thinking. So when you have trouble studying, use A, B, C, O, Q. Don't try to read it. Just go and try to pick out stuff. Pick out the words. Pick out the names. Pick out the dates. And your brain starts to get stimulated because it starts getting interesting, even when it's real boring or you think it's boring. I teach people to do this, and I deliberately give them some of the boringest literature ever written. And I make them read it linearly, and usually by the time they're halfway through the second page, I start hearing foreheads hit the table because it gets so boring. Because see, if your mind is not stimulated, your brain starts to shut down going to sleep. It says, you know, I'm not getting any stimulation, and so I'm going to start going into the dream mode. You ever notice that? Sometimes you'll be very, very bored with a particular program on TV, and you start to go to sleep, and you click on over to hockey or something, or football, or commando gardening or something like that, and all of a sudden you kind of perk up. Okay? You know? That's what happens. So, when you do A, B, C, O, Q notes, it gets your mind moving a little differently. You're doing block notes in a different order. You're just listing all the words, then you're listing all the people, and just making a list. They're just shopping lists. All you're going to do is shop for what they mean. It becomes much easier. Math. Everybody's starting to get sullen now with math. Ever have trouble with math test? Everybody, any, you know? I remember a friend of mine, I was in college, and this guy was a football player, played college football, and he had all kinds of trouble with math. He used to shake his head and say, no, you know, I'm never going to get this, I'm never going to get this. But then when you started asking him about his performance statistics, yards per carry, how many yards he got in a game, the other teams, what the other teams did, what their passing yardage was, number of tackles they made, he was able to rattle the numbers off. He didn't have a problem with math. He just had a blockage with math. I met him 15 years later. He had played 5 years for Denver, the Broncos, as a defensive back, met him many years. And while he was in Denver, he got into real estate, got into investments. And he's a whiz at math now, because when you start counting your own money, you get real good at math. When you have to count your own money that other people are handling, you get real good at math. At that time he says, I don't have any problem with math now. I'm on top of it. I know every day how much I'm worth as he checks the stock market and how much a stock's worth. So, a lot of times in math, you won't get a multiple choice test in math. Most of the time it's kind of a fill in the blank. You got to write the answer down. In some cases they make you write the whole, all of your work and stuff out, right? Just to see where you made the mistake. So things like the SAT and the GED and the CLEP, you're going to get multiple choice math. But most of the time, fill in the blank. There's only 4 things you need to know about math. Only 4 things you need to think about. I'm not going to teach you calculus. I'm not going to teach you trig. I'm going to teach you the 4 things you need to know about math. 4F math. You need to understand the formula, like the area of a triangle, 1/2 base times height. You need to know the formula. There are a finite number of formulas you need between now and college, and there's only a finite number of formulas you're going to need through college based on what your major is. I didn't major in science when I went to college. I started out as a computer science major, and I finished with a criminal justice degree, so you can see how my college life went. But I tried to do the heavy-duty math up front in computer science, and towards the end of my college career, I was looking at simple math, like number of days to the end of the month and how much money I had at that time, and divided it by the number of days I had left. The other thing you need to understand is simply factors. There are only 2 types of factors. There are numbers that have a value, and there are variables. X, Y, Z, A, B, C, letters that stand for numbers. And your job is to figure out numbers using the variables and sticking numbers in and coming up with the conclusion and knowing the difference. Functions. There are only 4 functions in math: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. If you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, do it in the formula, put the factors in properly, you're going to get the answer. Now, you know why people have so much trouble with math? You know why? Because they don't fit the stuff in properly. You have to be able to know where to insert the numbers, where to insert the variables, and what the formula is. So when you see a very complicated math problem, there is no such thing as a complicated math problem. There's just a math problem that requires you to do a little bit more adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing than other math problems do. As long as you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you can figure out any math problem as long as you understand the formula and know where everything fits. Your best preparation for any kind of math is to practice and practice and practice. Just do the problems. Every math book has exercises. Why do they put the exercises in there? So that you exercise. But most people don't want to do the exercises, and those who don't do the exercises probably don't do as well on tests, do they? Right? Just like exercising for athletics, those who don't exercise when they're playing basketball probably are going to be beat by other people who exercise more. Same thing with football. Same thing with bowling. Professional bowlers bowl a lot more than I do. You with me? Essay exams. When we take essay exams, we use this thing that we had talked about earlier called KISS notes. Key points, insight, significance, summation. Key points. What's the elements of facts? What can I copy and quote? What do I know absolutely to be facts? Insight. What do I think about it? What did somebody else think about it? Significance. Why is it important? Summation. You're just summarizing. You'd be surprised the number of people who don't do this. If they just put these elements together when they wrote an essay exam, they'd make a lot better grade. Use parallel notes. You may be taking things from multiple sources, or if you take notes on your book and notes in class, you put the 2 sets of notes together, and guess what? Things that are emphasized in class that were in the book, those are probably going to be on the test, aren't they? Right? What we're looking at is you need to organize your knowledge. If you're doing linear reading, your knowledge isn't organized. You have to organize your thinking. How are you going to use that knowledge? And you have to express both in an essay exam. If you know everything but can't express it very well, you're not going to do well in an essay exam. If you don't know anything but you eloquently say nothing very eloquently, practicing to be a politician, you're not going to do very well either. Short answer, you're going to recite longer chains of information. You're going to do abstracts and vignettes. An abstract is like 1 paragraph. A vignette may be 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 paragraphs. They need to cover it a little deeper. You would still use the KISS process. I'm going to quote some facts, I'm going to tell you some perspectives, and I'm going to tell you why it's important. Right? Sure? How many of you have ever been to church? Okay? You ever notice, if you really, those of you who listen to the preacher, okay, you ever notice that they go through a particular process? What's the first thing that they do when they start their sermon? They open the Bible up or whatever resource they're going to use and they quote from it, don't they? Right? They're pulling out the key points. They're quoting factual information. Now, whether or not you believe the Bible to be fact, what they're doing is pulling it from the source. They're referring to, let's turn to this book, this chapter, this verse, and pulling out the information. Then they're going to give you insight. They're going to talk to you about what it means to them, what it should mean to you, right? Then significance, why it's important that you look at it this way, why it's important that you start doing something a certain way, right? Then they summarize it all, don't they? They start going, in conclusion, and about that time you start thinking, how can I get towards the door a little closer to the door to get out to avoid the rush? In conclusion. And sometimes they take 20 minutes to conclude, right? When you do that, when you're talking about the KISS process, that's all it is. You see it all the time. Doing a short essay, we're going to recite key points. You're going to probably use a vignette, longer, maybe 2-3 paragraphs. You're going to reason. You're going to try to use more insights and significance. Long essay. You're going to recite information. You're going to do some reasoning. You're going to use a rhetorical process. You may take 2 different perspectives. You may be asked to take 2 different perspectives on some controversial position. If you take SAT exams, they're going to ask you to take a position. And for you to take a position, you have to be able to effectively recite and reason the other position as well as you do yours. You've got to be able to shoot holes in the other person's position, to be able to explain why they're wrong. Not just because they're wrong, but why are they wrong? You would use a KISS system. You would use parallel notes. You would use one set of notes for one position, one set of notes for another position. We have a thing called a monograph format. Monograph format is a format on how to write. It tells you what to write on each sentence. In fact, I'm going to tell you. Write this down. 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 2, 2. That's a formula for a monograph. 2 sentences of introduction. 4 sentences of key points. 6 sentences to write your insights and significance. 8 sentences of detail. 2 sentences summarizing the detail. 2 sentences concluding your thinking. And 2 sentences closing your paper. That's it. If we were in the writing class, the writing program, I would show you how, through history, many famous people wrote 26-sentence monographs using the 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 2, 2 formula. We take our notes. We talked about KISS notes, talked about parallel notes. In anticipating tests, there are 3 things that you need to have in order to effectively anticipate tests. You need the textbook, because they're going to take information of the textbook and ask you about it, right? Then, of course, the teacher. Teacher's going to talk about things, right? And then there are previous tests. Sometimes you can get a hold of previous tests. Now, maybe not so much in high school, but in college you can get a hold of previous tests, because a lot of times, a lot of the departments will keep old tests. When I taught college, I had prepared questions. I gave them the questions about, 2nd or 3rd class. These are the questions you're going to have to effectively answer at the end of the semester. So they had all semester to think about them and work up their answer. Because they're not answers you could just simply copy down. It was answers that they were going to have to write, because I gave essay exams. You with me? When we have text questions, if you're going to a textbook, you have back information, either at the end of a section or a chapter. That back information usually has questions, it has terms, it has summaries. You go back through and you look at the headings. Those are ways to extract questions from the textbook. The easiest way is to take the questions that the textbook has, right? And then sometimes you may need to go in and make up some questions of your own. Take the headers and write questions from the headers. Transform the heading into a question. Look at the summaries. See if there's enough information in the summaries to answer the questions. Teacher questions. You need to be prepared to come to class to ask the teacher questions. If you come to class and you're asking pertinent questions that had to do with the reading, first off, the teacher knows you did the reading, so they're going to think, well, you're pretty smart. You're diligent. You're doing the reading. And then, because you're asking the questions, you're taking the initiative in the learning process. And the teacher is going to want to answer your question. Anything the teacher writes on the board it's a pretty good idea, stuff that the teacher writes on the board that's probably going to appear someplace else, isn't it? And sometimes a lot of the class discussions. You want to pull that information in. ABC questions, abstracted terms, biographies, chronologies. Ask yourself ABC questions when you're in class. What's the teacher talking about? What are the terms the teacher's using? People the teacher is referring to. I referred to somebody tonight. Do you remember who I referred to? Remember who I referred to? Mortimer Adler. We saw his picture, didn't we? Chronologies. We haven't done too many dates here, but we may get into some dates here. Thematic questions. Thematic questions are tough questions. They're not who, what, when, where. It's kind of like discuss the impact Columbus had on the Indians. Describe the process of Texas independence. Analyze the voters in the last election, the voting patterns in the last election. Those are those aren't one-word answers, are they? They require reasoning, they require thought, they require stuff. And so what you would do is go to the headings, the headers that are in the chapter, and you would ask thematic questions. Describe, discuss, explain, analyze. If the first heading in a textbook, for example, a history textbook, if the first heading of the chapter in the textbook would be the Advent or the Vikings in America. Vikings in America. What would you think would be a thematic question if the heading was Vikings in America? Discuss the impact of the Vikings in America. Describe what the Vikings did in America. You see how easy that is? All you have to do is kind of stick that word in front of it. And then you have to develop it. You give them who, what, when, where, how, why. Once you begin to think that way, it becomes very easy. Because you know what? You think the same way. You think the same way. You just don't apply it. When you're trying to make an excuse on why you didn't do anything, you're very good at this. You begin to give who, what, when, where, how, and why. You begin to explain. You're very good at it when you start doing things like that, but you don't think on how to apply it someplace else. Outlines, chapter summaries, those are very important. You can pull thematic questions from them. Test-taking strategies. When you actually take the test, what do I do when I take the test? Well, we'll talk about how to preview a test. We're going to talk about how to do an objective exam, an essay exam, and we're going to talk about time management. How many of you scored lower in a test because you ran out of time? Ever happened to you? And if you had your time management down a little bit, you probably would have scored better because you probably weren't aware of the time. And you were probably stuck on a question that had a low number of points to it but took you a long time to figure out, where there were probably other questions that had higher number of points that you knew the answers to, but you didn't have time to get to them, right? You ever have that happen to you? You knew the answers to the other questions, but you got stuck on one. When we preview a test, we use this system. It's called scope, schema, scan, skim. Can you do that? Scope, schema, scan, skim. Scope, schema, scan, skim. What you do when you preview a test, you're going to scope the test. Too many people, when they take the test, as soon as they get the test, they start on question one. You ever had one of those trick tests done to you where the teacher tells you, read the whole test first before you take it? And most people don't pay attention, and the last question on the test is, if you made one mark on this, you flunked the test. You ever had something like that? Okay? So the first thing you want to do, even if the teacher doesn't tell you to do that, you scope through the test. If it's a multiple-page test, you thumb through it. You scope the test, see what's there. You figure out the number of questions that there are. You want to estimate how much time you have and how long it's going to take you to do the test, and you want to get yourself a pace. You want to divide the number of questions with the time you have. It's a very simple process. Always scope out your test so you don't get caught in the trap, so you don't get caught not paying attention. Because if you pay attention and you follow instructions, 99% of life becomes easy. The only time you really have trouble is when you don't follow instructions and you're not paying attention when somebody else is not following instructions. That's how car accidents happen. The other person is not following instructions and you are not paying attention, right? Schema. What we want to do is look at the type of questions. Did you ever have a test that had different types of questions, had some matching and multiple choice and some short answer and some essay? They kind of mix them all up. You ever had one of those tests? If you haven't, come to my class because I have those kind of tests. We mix them up. So what you want to do is you want to see how things are mixed up, and then you have what's called relative weights. Sometimes the teachers will say 1 point per multiple choice question, 5 point per short answer, and there are 2 20-point essay questions, right? So you have relative weight. Some of the questions carry more points than other questions. You've got to figure that out. You don't need to bog yourself down on 1 point questions. You need to begin to focus on the questions that are going to give you the most points, right? Scan. You want to look at priority questions. What questions should you actually go to first? Then you want to look at potential problems. You want to see ahead of time, are there any questions there that I abjectly don't know the answer to? But you want to see those questions first, because if you see them first and you go back and start working some of the other questions, your brain's going back and your subconscious is starting to dig up stuff. It gives your brain more time to work on it. If you've got a question you don't know, your brain has more time to work on it, and as you take the test and get other information, it may trigger you to remember some of the stuff on some of the questions that you may not know about. You with me? Skim. What we do with skim is we want to look at what we call cheap questions. Questions that you know the answers to now. Let's go ahead and answer those questions so we can get those points out of the way. You with me? Cheap questions. Then we want to look for what's called embedded answers. Some questions have the answers to other questions. You ever had a test that had that? You want to look for embedded answers. You want to look at some of those questions that you don't know and look at the other questions that may have clues to the answer to that question. You with me? You'd be surprised how many questions you don't know you can answer using this way. Now, when you're taking objective tests, the multiple choice, matching, fill in the blank, and short answer, what you want to do is take block notes like we showed you, kind of a table. Do your ABCOQ. Be able to recognize what information goes together. Begin to be able to recall what goes together and recite. You should be able to match things that go multiple choice or matching. You should be able to fill in the blank because they give you half the answer. You should be able to recite something, give them a list. In our multiple choice, a very important aspect of multiple choice is to do what's called process of elimination. We're not going to look for the right answer. We're going to look for the wrong answers and eliminate them. When you do standardized exams, this is the primary strategy you use. If you don't know the answer, you mark and move. You mark it and move on. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to grunt it out because it's not going to come out very easily. If you don't know the answer, mark it and move on because you might find the answer in another question. You're going to look for clues. Multiple choice, you're trying to take something that's known in the question to something that's known in the answer and putting them together. You're going to try to eliminate what you know doesn't go together. Let's do process elimination to show you how it works. Which planet is farthest from the sun? Do you know which one it is? How many of you know which one it is? What do you think it is? Pluto, okay? So you pretty well know this answer, don't you? Is that correct, Pluto? So if I was to ask this question, this would be like a fill-in-the-blank question, right? Right? Which planet is farthest from the sun? Okay? So which would be a harder question, a multiple choice or fill-in-the-blank? If I was to ask this question. Fill-in-the-blank? What if this looks like this? Which planet is farthest from the sun? There's no place over there to write Pluto in, is there? Okay? So you knew the answer, didn't you? Okay, where is it? It's not on there, is it? Okay? So what you have to do, because Pluto, the answer you know is correct, they're not asking for the farthest planet out. They want to know, of these 5, which one is farthest out. Right? So we first thing we want to do is go through a process of elimination. You know? We can pretty well figure out Mercury, Mars, and Venus. They're kind of close to us. So if they're kind of close to the Earth, they're probably not the farthest out, right? At least we know they're closer to us than some of these other ones, Neptune and Jupiter, right? So we can strike these out. We can strike out the wrong answers. See how this is working? We're going to get rid of the wrong answers. It leaves us with 2. And we just got to try to figure out which one of these is further out. And actually, it's Neptune is further out than Jupiter. Because you can see Jupiter from the Earth. You can see Neptune, but you need a telescope and a good eye. But you see how you do this? It's a calculated strike is what we call it. Process of elimination. And when you do standardized testing, that's what you do. You do a process of elimination. Even if you know for sure you know what the answer is. Because if you know for sure what the answer is, you'd have gotten Pluto wrong on this, wouldn't you? This is where what you do know can help you with what you don't know. You with me? Trick answers. You ever had a teacher put trick answers in? I have never put a trick answer in any of the questions I've ever written. I have put questions that required you to pay attention and to follow instructions, and if you didn't pay attention and you didn't follow instructions, it felt like you got hit with a trick answer. Here's some trick answers. Landmines. They look right, but they're wrong. You have what's called bonehead answers. Bonehead answers are answers that you go to immediately because you think you know. You go to Pluto quickly just to find out that Pluto is not the right answer. Doofus answer is based on your ignorance. Well, I didn't know, so I took the word that looked the longest. Sometimes you take tests and you think the answer is the one that's most complicated to you. You ever done that? Marked it because I didn't understand it. It looked the most complicated, so I just picked that one. Okay? And then sucker answers. Sucker answers are like that question at the end of the test is if you wrote on the test, you get an F. They kind of set you up. They make you think one thing and then another. Example. What is the smallest state in population? Now, if you went through this too fast, and of course if you knew the answer, you would probably stop at smallest state and pick Rhode Island. But it's asking for population, and the smallest state in population from this list here is Alaska. This would be going through and doing what's called a bonehead answer. You didn't take time to read the question. And so, if you picked Rhode Island, you went through too fast. You ever done that? Didn't read the whole question, thought you knew it, and wrote the wrong answer, but you really knew the right answer had you just taken an extra 4 seconds to read the question more thoroughly? Right? Ever happened to you? Sometimes you just don't know. Who was the 16th president? Well, 16, you're going to have to use your toes, okay? Or borrow somebody else's fingers. That's really just not something that you get off the top of your head, right? Who was the 16th president? So, you know what you do? You kind of just mark this and move on, because maybe you can find something else someplace else. You know, you're going to look for clues and other questions. Who was the 16th president? Okay? Now, guessing. That's what I talk about, process of elimination. Sometimes you can guess. You mark and move, you look for clues. Sometimes there's a guessing penalty. In some standardized tests, there's a guessing penalty. They will cut you extra points for getting a wrong answer instead of leaving it blank. Things like the SAT, you will get like 10 points per correct answer, but if you write a wrong answer, they will subtract 2 points. But if you leave it blank, they won't subtract any points. That's called a guessing penalty. They try to penalize you for guessing, to try to reduce your guessing. And so You have to look if there's going to be a guessing penalty. Most of the multiple choice tests that you're going to get in school are not going to have guessing penalties. You're looking for an answer profile. An answer profile. If you're taking a true-false test and there are 50 questions, about how many of them are going to be true? About 25, right? How many of them are going to be false? About 25. So if you're bouncing about question 40 and you've got 35 true answers, you probably need to say, you know what? I probably am going to have a problem with this because my answer profile is wrong. Calculated guessing. That's where you go through and letting what you do know help you with what you don't know. Eliminating the answers that you know are wrong. And if you have to guess, at least you got it down to 2 as opposed to 5, right? Matching type questions. You want to look at both lists. Use a process of elimination. Sometimes you can do what's called a reverse answer. Sometimes they try to get hairy with you and do multiple answers. You ever had a matching question where you could have more than one answer that could match? You ever had one of those? Really tricky, sneaky. Sometimes if you don't have it, you mark and move. Let me show you how you do this. Process of elimination. If you're matching cities with locations and they line up like this, you can eliminate Texas as an answer for Austin because you've already used it. Usually, nice people who do matching questions, that's what they do. They do one for one. They don't try to really trick you. You can also do what's called reverse answer. You want to say, I'm going to look at the other side and see what matches with it. Sometimes you get multiple answers. Like in Michigan, it can be Detroit or Grand Rapids. It goes together, And you got to watch it. You've got to make sure that the parameters of the test indicate whether there are going to be multiple answers. Fill in the blank. First president of the U.S. is something known in the question. We're looking for first president, right? And then we want to pick up something that's known in your memory, right? How many of you can answer this? How many of you think you have the right answer? You sure? Now, if I had this, George Washington was, there's multiple answers, right? Multiple potential correct answers. George Washington was first president, Revolutionary War general, father of our country. Which one of those is the wrong answer? None of them. Each one of those is a correct answer. So you've got to understand context of your question. Because sometimes they'll ask a question like this, and they're looking for a particular answer. And you may give them an answer that is correct, but is wrong. You can be correct, but be wrong. We haven't got this one yet. 16th president was. We still haven't gotten this one, have we? It's still there. We got to mark and move, right? Mark and move. 16th president, mark and move. We had a multiple choice one, didn't we? And now there's a fill in the blank one. Do we know who it is? We still don't know who it is. Now, number 6, blank became the 17th president after Lincoln was assassinated. Oh. Now, do we know who the 17th president was? The 17th? No, we don't know. But we know who the 16th was, right? So how many questions can we now answer from another question that we don't know the answer to? We can answer 2 questions. And you'll be surprised in a lot of tests that this will happen. A lot of tests. So we may miss this one, but we're going to get 2 other ones correct. Because we've got clues. We've picked up clues. We've now got a known in one question from a known in another question, and we managed to put them together. You ever figure this one out? Do you ever think about it this way? How many is the first time that they've ever looked at it this way? Don't be sure. Short answers. You're going to handle like a fill in the blank. You want to get a list of things, a chain of things. Mark and move if you have no idea. Look for clues. You're going to write an abstract or a vignette, short paragraph or 2. You want to use the KISS process. Key points, insight, significance. Now, one of the things about this short answer and sometimes essay questions, a lot of the information that you can put into a short answer or an essay question are going to be back in the other questions, the multiple choice and the fill in the blanks. Essay exams, you want to use the ROAD method. Read, organize, analyze, and document. Very similar principles to writing. Very similar, just applied a little bit different. And when you're reading in a writing process, you're going to read your source material, right? In an essay test, you want to read the question thoroughly. When you're going to write, you're going to organize information. However, in an essay test, you need to organize what we call your template and your thoughts. You need to organize how you're going to template your answer and what thoughts you're going to put where. When you analyze for writing a regular paper, you're going to look at perspectives on the information. When you're writing an essay test, you've got to analyze what's the question asking. What's the question asking? I do a lot of reviews of students who send me their essays that they have to send in with their college applications. And I had one gentleman send me an essay, and they asked about his particular values and an example of an experience he had that helped him forge that value. And he wrote a very good paragraph, but nowhere could I pick out what his value was, and nowhere did he indicate a specific experience. Very well written, but it didn't answer the question. They wanted him to say, this is what I value, and these are the experiences that led to that. Didn't answer the question. So when you document, when you're writing, you're going to use tables and notes, but when you're taking an essay test, you document your essay. You're not going to turn in your notes, are you? Are you? Read the question. You need to recall and remember what you learned. You need to be able to reference, quote, indicate people, indicate sources. People like that in essay exams. If you can quote people or say, this is where I got the information, or I remember from a particular lecture. They like that. You're going to organize a template. A template is simply a pattern that you're going to use when you write an essay. For a short essay, you're going to use an abstract or a vignette template. Abstract, again, is one paragraph. Vignette is one or two, or is 2 or 3 paragraphs. Or a KISS paper. You may want to use a paragraph to indicate your key points, a paragraph to indicate your insights, and a paragraph for your significance, and a paragraph to summarize. You can do that. On a long essay, you may want to do the KISS paper, key points, insight, significance, summation, and expand it a little bit more. Or you may want to do the monograph, the 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 2, 2. Can you do that? 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 2, 2. When you organize your thinking, you want to look at the facts, findings, conclusions that you have, feelings that you have, and any filler. That's detail. You want to look at what we call ethos, pathos, and logos. In our writing course, we go into this a great deal. But ethos, pathos, and logos is simply ethos. That's the reputation or the source material you have, the facts you're dealing with. The pathos, the emotion it's bringing out. The logos, the logical reasoning behind it. They line up with key points, insight, and significance. That's how we can apply it. When you're analyzing, you need to figure out what the question is asking. Like my friend who was sending me his essay, he really didn't understand what the question was asking because he wasn't answering it properly. You have to find out what type of question it is. Is it simply looking for facts? When you're just looking for facts, they're asking you to assimilate facts, they're asking for what's called a data dump. If they want to process, they want you to analyze something step by step by step or break it down. If they're looking for a position, they want you to argue a position. Get an opinion, take a position. In facts, you do a data dump. You just regurgitate a lot of data in essay form. Who, what, when, where. You can be topical or thematic, but you're just going to regurgitate information. Here's a fact question. Identify the candidates and discuss the platforms in the presidential election of 1912. Nobody's going to take me on that. Discuss the problems of the Article of Confederation. Explain the elements of literature. Describe the 5 causes of disease. Explain the trigonometric functions of a right triangle. These are not opinionated. You can't really put opinion in this, can you? Trigonometric functions of a right triangle. In my opinion, there's no opinion in right triangle functions, are there? You know? There's no opinion in elements of literature. You know, plot, character, setting, theme. Those are standard. You can't sit there and say, well, I don't like theme. I don't like theme. Theme is something I really don't like. Okay? Process. Trying to figure out how and why. They'll ask a process type question, sequence, chronology, steps, analytical elements, breaking it down. It can be topical or thematic. Process questions. Describe how a bill becomes law. That's a process, right? House of Representatives, Senate, goes to the President. Discuss why a constitutional convention was called. Chronology of events, right? Analyze the elements of literature in Moby Dick. You would list the elements of literature and then you would analyze it and break it down. Explain how food is converted to energy in the human body. That's a process, isn't it? Biological process. How is the distance of an object from the sun calculated using astronomical units? Does anybody know this one? You want me to tell you the secret? I'm going to divert a little bit from here. The distance in astronomical units from the sun is the distance of Earth to the sun. 1 astronomical unit from Earth to the sun. Anytime you see anything that's between the Earth and the sun, and you can get its furthest observed distance from the sun, if you can compute the angle to that object by simply using the tangent function, tangent is, opposite over adjacent, and adjacent is 1, because it's 1 astronomical unit from the Earth, so whatever the tangent is will be the distance from the sun, because it's over 1. Anything over 1 is the value, right? So if it's 50 million over 1, it's 50 million. It's just the tangent. So now you know. You've learned astronomy tonight, and we weren't even teaching it. You learned that Pluto wasn't the farthest from the sun in our question, right? Although really it is, except before 1999. From 1979 to 1999, Neptune was actually further away because Pluto has an orbit that comes inside the orbit of Neptune for 20 years, every 400-something years. So it's once in your lifetime and probably not again, unless there's a major galactic shift. So anyway, process questions. We're looking for sequence, steps, and elements. Position questions. You want to compare and contrast things. You want to get a point, perspective, opinion. Case studies. When you get into college, you're going to do case studies. Why did this happen the way it did? Argument. Hypothetical. You ever done a hypothetical? What if? You get on the evening news every night, and there's always reporters there. What if? What if? What if? It's thematic or thesis. Thematic, getting common themes, looking across multiple sources, or thesis, you're holding a position. Here's some position questions. What are the differences between the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution? Should a military draft be instated? That's a position question. You can take sides on that, right? A lot of people taking sides on it. Analyze the SAT and discuss how the SAT could be changed to meet new challenges. Discuss the electoral college process, why the electoral college process should or should not be continued. A lot of people talked about the electoral college in this last election, didn't they? It's June 1st, 2010. You get on the internet, describe the lead story in the news. That's hypothetical, isn't it? That is actually an essay question on a college application. They're looking for issues, looking for ideas, looking for your insight, how well you think about things. With me? Document, writing the essays. Here's the sequence of writing an essay. If you've got an essay exam, you do a thing called side notes, and I'll show you that in a second. You use a KISS process. You may want to expand it into a monograph. You do insertions and how to do the timing. Side notes. What you want to do is on the side someplace, on the margin someplace, is begin to write little notes to yourself. Don't immediately start writing. You want to organize your thinking. So on the side, a margin, a scrap piece of paper, you want to bullet KISS. You want to bullet 1 or 2 words per bullet. What are the facts you're going to be dealing with? You're going to take some bullets and indicate what details am I going to add into this essay. And you want to keep that bullet list going because as you begin to write the essay, you're going to get other ideas, so you put them in your little bullet list on the side or on a scrap piece of paper. After you put your KISS bullets in, you want to add some detail bullets. You want to skip about 5 lines, depending on the type of essay, but about 5 lines, because you want to leave the introduction for last. You want to start in the middle. You start writing your key points, your insight, your significance. You jot down more bullets as they come to mind. Don't put them in the essay, put them on your little bullet list. You ever written an essay and all of a sudden you thought about something that should have gone in there and it was too late to put it in? You ever done that? Going, oh, there's a way of putting it in. Now, as you write your details, you set yourself up to have a 5-minute warning, because these things are timed, right? So you want a 5-minute warning. At 5 minutes, you stop writing whatever you're writing, and you go and you write the introduction. And then you go back and continue to write details. At the 2-minute warning, you write your summary and your conclusion. That's how you do it. Now, in a formal written essay, it would be a little bit in the reverse. You would write your summary and conclusion and then write the introduction. But now, because of you've got time constraints, you want to write the introduction and then the summary and conclusion. It's better to have a dangling summary and conclusion in a written timed essay than to have no introduction. You with me? Detailed bullets. You may have a list of detailed bullets that you wrote down, but because of time constraints, you were not able to get them into the essay. So what you do at the 2-minute warning, you just jot the bullets down in the essay really quick. At least the teacher knows you knew that information, but the teacher knows also you didn't have time to put it in. You went ahead and just jot down the bullets in a list. Skip a space in between. So at least they know that you were organizing and getting ready to write about them. See, they'll give you constructive credit if they know you knew, but you ran out of time getting to them. Think about that. At least they know you knew. If you forget something, as you're writing details and stuff out, if you forget something that needs to go in that probably should have gone in someplace else, because they don't give you a whole bunch of time to edit, do they? You would insert something that would say something like this. In addition to the key points presented previously, and you insert something that should have gone earlier in the essay, or you could say another issue that needs to be addressed, or which brings us to this point. Okay? So it looks like that even though you forgot it, in your writing it looks like you knew it and you're inserting it at the proper place, which may or may not be the proper place, right? You've got to be able to transition into something you forgot. It's very important to do this. Timing, long essay. What you want to do is read the question, take about a minute to make sure you understand the question. You want to start writing your little side notes, your little bullets, take about 2 to 4 minutes. Divide the remaining time by 3. Take about 1/3 of your time to work on your KISS elements, key points, insight, significance. Then the last 2/3 of your time on your monograph, you're going to put details in. The only thing that's different between a monograph and a KISS paper is a monograph, you're going to add a more elaborate introduction, you're going to add more detail, and you're going to have a summary and a conclusion. That's it. At 5-minute warning, you do your intro, continue your detail bullets. 2-minute warning, write your summary and conclusion. Time management. On an objective test, preview it. Do your scope, schema, scan, skim. Mark and move. Don't waste time on questions you don't know. Divide your time by 3. You want to take 2/3 of your time going through the test on a first pass. Answering the questions that you know, skipping the questions that you don't know. You want to take 2/3 of the time and divide it by the number of questions. What you want to do is take the last third of your time and hit what we call your open questions. Questions that you left open that you're going to go back and look at, or check questions to make sure that you either marked them correctly or you weren't sure on them. Make sure you use your time efficiently. More people lose points on tests because of time management than they do because they don't know. Just because you know doesn't mean you're going to be fast. In mixed tests, where you have objective and essay, of course, preview, do your scope, schema, scan, skim, do your mark and move, divide the time by the weight of points. If there are a lot of points weighted to the essay, you want to put more emphasis on the essay. Double the time you allocate to essays. If you've got 50 points in essays and 50 points in objective questions, 2/3 of your time needs to be allocated for the essays. You with me? Doing your time management. Double the weight on the essays. Now, here's our roll-up. We talked about the levels of knowledge, testing modes, testing formats, embedded information, how you can get answers from other questions on the test, process of elimination, using what you don't know to help you, using what you do know to help you with what you don't know, side notes, and the KISS process. Levels of knowledge, resource, reference, recognition, recall, recitation, reasoning, and rhetorical. Testing modes, timed, self-paced, self-administered, resourced, and online. Our formats, both objective and essay. The process of elimination, remember this one. Side notes, organizing our thoughts, putting them on the side, a scrap, margin. The KISS process, key points, insight, significance. Our time management. It's very important that we have our time management. Here's my contact information, docbeasley@aol.com, website www.gatewayprep.com. If you have any questions or want to contact me, this is how we do it.